The alarm on the bridge of the New Horizon cut through the quiet hum of deep space travel like a knife. Captain Jake Morrison sat up straight in his command chair, his coffee cup forgotten as red lights flashed across the control panels. "What do we have, Danny?" Jake asked, turning to his communications officer. Danny Walsh's fingers danced across his console, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's a distress signal, Captain, coming from the Kepler 442 system. But that's strange. There are no colonies out there, no registered ships either." Jake stood and walked over to Danny's station. The signal was weak, barely cutting through the background noise of space. But it was definitely there, repeating the same pattern over and over again. "Lisa, how far off course would this take us?" Jake called to his chief engineer. Lisa Carter looked up from her engineering station, her blonde hair tied back in a practical ponytail. "About 6 days, Captain. We're carrying extra supplies anyway, so fuel isn't a problem." Jake nodded slowly. They were on a routine supply run to the outer colonies, nothing urgent. And maritime law, even in space, was clear about distress signals. You answered them no matter what. "Set course for Kepler 442, Jake ordered. "And Danny, keep trying to raise whoever's sending that signal." The New Horizon was a small exploration vessel, built for long-range missions with a crew of just 4 people. Besides Jake, Lisa, and Danny, there was Dr. Ben Rodriguez, their medic and science officer, and Amy Foster, their xenobiologist. It wasn't much of a crew, but they had worked together for 3 years and trusted each other completely. 6 days later, they dropped out of hyperspace near a frozen world that looked like a giant snowball hanging in the darkness. The planet was covered in ice from pole to pole, with no visible signs of life on the surface. "The signal is definitely coming from down there," Danny reported, "but it's not coming from the surface. It's coming from underneath." Amy Foster joined them on the bridge, her tablet in hand. She was young for a xenobiologist, only 26, but she knew her job better than anyone. "The planet has a dying star," she said, pointing to the dim red sun in the distance. "It's cooling down faster than it should. Whatever was living here would have had to go underground to survive." Ben Rodriguez appeared a moment later, carrying his medical kit. He was a quiet man in his 40s, with steady hands and a calm manner that made everyone feel safe. "If there are survivors down there, they won't last much longer in these conditions," he said. Jake made his decision quickly. "We're going down. Lisa, prepare the shuttle. Amy, Ben, you're with me. Danny, stay here and monitor communications." The shuttle ride down to the planet's surface was rough. Ice storms raged across the frozen landscape, and the temperature readings made everyone shiver just looking at them. -200 degrees and dropping. They landed near where the signal was strongest and found what looked like a metal door built into the ice. It was clearly artificial, but the design was unlike anything they had seen before. Strange symbols covered its surface, and it was partially frozen shut. "Alien technology," Amy whispered, running her scanner over the door. "The metal is some kind of alloy I don't recognize, but the signal is definitely coming from behind this." Lisa pulled out a small plasma cutter and began working on the ice around the door. It took an hour, but finally the door groaned open, revealing a dark tunnel that led down into the planet. They activated their helmet lights and began walking. The tunnel was clearly built for beings about the same size as humans, but the architecture was different. Everything curved in ways that seemed almost organic, like the inside of a seashell. As they walked deeper, they began to see evidence of a civilization. Carved walls showed pictures of tall, thin beings with what looked like crystalline skin. There were symbols and writing, art that was beautiful even though they couldn't understand it. "This is incredible," Amy breathed, recording everything, with her camera. An entire underground city. They must have built this when their son started dying. But as they went deeper, it became clear that something was wrong. The tunnels were dark and cold. There were no sounds of life, no movement, no lights except for their own. Emergency lighting flickered weakly in some areas, but most of the city was dead. They followed the distress signal deeper into the complex, through empty streets and past silent buildings. Everything was covered in a thin layer of frost. The Aeon Temperature was below freezing, but not as cold as the surface. Finally, they reached the source of the signal. It was coming from a small chamber deep in the heart of the city. As they approached, they could see a faint glow coming from inside. Jake pushed open the door carefully, and they all gasped at what they saw. In the center of the room, huddled around a small heating device that was clearly running out of power, was an alien being. She was tall and thin, just like in the pictures they had seen, with skin that looked like it was made of blue-green crystal. She was wrapped in what looked like thermal blankets, and in her arms she held a smaller version of herself. A baby. The alien looked up at them with large, dark eyes that showed no fear, only desperate hope. She said something in a language they couldn't understand, but her meaning was clear. She was pointing at the baby and pleading. Ben immediately pulled out his medical scanner and began taking readings. "They're both alive, but barely," he reported. "Their body temperature is dropping fast. That heating device won't last much longer." Amy was already working with her translation program, trying to make sense of the alien's words. After a few minutes, she looked up with tears in her eyes. "Her name is Zarath," Amy said quietly. "The baby's name translates to something like hope. She's not asking us to save her, she's asking us to save her child." Jake looked around the small chamber and felt his heart break. This mother had been sitting here in the dark and cold, using the last bit of power in their city to keep her baby warm. She had sent the distress signal not for herself, but for her child. "How many others are there?" Jake asked. Amy continued working with the translation program. After talking with Zarath, for several minutes she turned back to the team with a grim expression. "Thousands," she said, "scattered throughout the city in small groups trying to survive. But their power is failing everywhere. She says they have maybe days before it's all gone." Jake looked at the alien mother holding her baby and made a decision. That would change everything. "We're not leaving them here," he said firmly. "I don't care what the regulations say. We're going to find a way to help." Back on the New Horizon, the crew gathered in the small conference room. The weight of what they had discovered pressed down on them like a heavy blanket. Jake sat at the head of the table, his hands clasped in front of him, while the others shared what they had learned. Ben Rodriguez was the first to speak. "I've analyzed the scans from Zarath and her baby. They're carbon-based life forms, but their body chemistry is completely different from ours. They need much warmer temperatures than what they're getting down there. The baby especially won't survive much longer." Amy Foster nodded, her tablet full of notes. "I've been working on the translation program. The Kythera, that's what they call themselves, were once a space-traveling civilization. When they realized their son was dying, they came back to their homeworld to try to find a solution. Instead, they got trapped here when the cooling happened faster than anyone expected." Lisa Carter had been running calculations on her computer. She looked up with a grim expression. "Captain, I've done the math 3 times. There are approximately 50,000 Kythera still alive in that city. Our ship can carry maybe 200 people maximum, and that's if we strip out all non-essential equipment and pack them in like cargo." The silence in the room was heavy. Jake felt the weight of 50,000 lives on his shoulders. 50,000 beings who were slowly freezing to death while he sat in his warm, comfortable ship. "What about the Galactic Council?" Danny asked. "Couldn't they send a rescue fleet?" Amy shook her head. "The Kythera are classified as a primitive civilization. The Council has strict non-interference policies. Even if we reported this, they'd say it's not our problem. And by the time we could get back here with help, they'd all be dead," Ben added quietly. Jake stood up and began pacing. "So our options are to follow the rules and watch an entire species die, or break every regulation in the book and probably end our careers." "There's something else," Amy said hesitantly. "I've been talking more with Zarath. She told me that the Kythera have a saying, 'The light of a child is worth more than all the stars in the sky.' Their entire culture revolves around protecting their young. That's why she sent the distress signal. Not for herself or the adults, but for the children who are dying down there." Ben leaned forward. "I might have some good news, though. I've been studying the baby, Hope, and I think I can create a temporary solution. The Kythera need certain minerals to survive. minerals that are common on their world, but rare in space. I might be able to create a synthetic substitute that would help them survive in slightly warmer conditions. Lisa nodded slowly. And I've been thinking about the power situation. If we could jury-rig some kind of heating network using our ship's fusion reactor, we might be able to bring the temperature up in the main areas of the city. It wouldn't be a permanent solution, but it would buy us time. Jake stopped pacing and looked at his crew. These people had been with him for 3 years. They had faced dangerous situations before, but nothing like this. He was asking them to risk everything for beings they had just met. I want to be clear about what we're talking about, Jake said. If we do this, if we try to help them, we're breaking about 20 different laws. The council will court-martial all of us. We'll lose our ship, our careers, probably spend time in prison. Danny was the first to respond. Captain, I have a little sister back on Earth. She's about the same age as that baby down there. If she was trapped somewhere, freezing and scared, I'd want someone to help her, even if it meant breaking a few rules. Ben nodded firmly. I became a doctor to save lives. It doesn't matter if those lives are human or alien. I'm in. Amy looked down at her tablet, where she had been recording conversations with Zarath. The Cathara have been keeping detailed records of their civilization for over 1,000 years. Art, science, philosophy, music, it's all down there. If we let them die, we're not just losing 50,000 lives. We're losing an entire culture. Lisa cracked her knuckles, a habit she had when she was about to tackle a difficult engineering problem. I've never met a heating system I couldn't fix. Let's go save some lives. Jake felt a surge of pride in his crew. These were good people, the kind of people who made humanity worth saving. All right then. Lisa, I need you to start working on that heating network. Use whatever equipment we have. Cannibalize the ship if you have to. Ben, keep working on that mineral substitute. Use Hope as your test subject, but be careful. Amy, I need you to learn everything you can about Cathara, society. We need to understand them if we're going to help them. Danny, I have a special job for you. I want you to send out a coded distress call to any human ships in the area. Don't mention the Cathara directly. Make it sound like we have some kind of equipment malfunction and need supplies. Danny raised an eyebrow. You think other ships will come? Jake smiled grimly. I'm counting on human nature. We have a reputation in this galaxy for being nosy and helpful. If there's even a chance that fellow humans are in trouble, someone will come. Over the next 2 days, the crew worked around the clock. Lisa spent 16 hours straight in the engine room, creating a heating system that could power the main sections of the Cathara city. She used power cables, heating elements, and portable generators, building something that looked more like modern art than engineering. Ben worked in the medical bay with Hope, the Cathara baby, carefully testing different mineral combinations. The baby was surprisingly strong and seemed to enjoy the attention. Her crystalline skin would glow brighter when she was happy, and dimmer when she was uncomfortable. Amy spent most of her time in the alien city, learning the Cathara language and customs. She discovered that they were a gentle, artistic people who had never known war. Their technology was advanced but focused on beauty and harmony rather than weapons or conquest. Danny monitored communications constantly, sending out coded messages and hoping for a response. On the second day, his patience was rewarded. Captain, he called excitedly, I'm getting responses to our distress call. 3 ships so far, all asking if we need assistance. Jake felt hope rising in his chest. How far out are they? The closest one is 2 days away. It's a cargo hauler called the Prairie Wind. The others are a few days behind that. Jake nodded. Keep them coming, Danny. We're going to need all the help we can get. That evening, Jake visited Zarath and Hope in their small chamber. The heating device was almost dead now, running on its last few minutes of power. But Lisa's heating network had begun working, and the temperature in the room had risen by almost 20 degrees. Zarath looked up at Jake with her large dark eyes and said something in her musical language. Amy, who had been sitting nearby, translated. She says thank you. She says she doesn't understand why strange beings from the stars would risk themselves for people they don't know, but she's grateful. She says Hope will remember this kindness for her whole life. Jake knelt down next to the alien mother and her baby. Hope looked up at him with curious eyes that seemed far too wise for someone so young. Tell her, Jake said to Amy, that where we come from, you don't leave children in the dark, no matter what the cost. The work began before sunrise on the third day. Lisa Carter had barely slept in 48 hours, but her eyes were bright with the kind of energy that came from solving an impossible problem. She stood in the main chamber of the Cathara city, surrounded by cables, heating units, and power converters that looked like they had been thrown together by someone in a hurry. The main heating grid is online, she reported to Jake over the radio. I've got power running to 12 sections of the city so far. Temperature is up to 40 degrees in most areas, 60 degrees in the main chambers. Jake could see his breath in the air, but it was warmer than it had been. Around them, the Cathara were emerging from their hiding places for the first time in weeks. They moved slowly, their crystalline skin glowing faintly as warmth returned to their bodies. How long can you maintain this? Jake asked. Lisa wiped sweat from her forehead despite the cold. Our fusion reactor is running at 110% capacity. I can keep this up for maybe a week before we start risking a core breach. After that, we'll need external power sources. In the medical area they had set up, Ben Rodriguez was having better luck. Hope, the Cathara baby, was thriving on his synthetic mineral supplement. Her skin glowed brighter than ever, and she had grown noticeably stronger in just 2 days. The mineral mixture is working perfectly, Ben told Amy as she helped him examine Hope. I've tested it on 3 other Cathara children, and they're all showing improvement. Adults need a different formula, but I think I can work that out. Amy nodded, but her attention was focused on Hope. The baby had learned to recognize her and would reach out with tiny crystalline hands whenever Amy came near. Ben, I think she's trying to communicate. Watch this. Amy hummed a simple melody, and Hope responded by making her skin glow in patterns that matched the rhythm of the song. It was beautiful and unmistakably intelligent. They're not just surviving, Amy said with wonder. They're learning. Hope is picking up human language faster than I'm learning theirs. Meanwhile, Danny Walsh was having the busiest day of his career. His coded distress call had worked better than anyone had expected. Ships were responding from across 3 star systems, all asking how they could help. Captain, you need to see this, Danny called from his communications station. We've got 17 ships now saying they're on their way. Cargo haulers, mining ships, even a medical transport from the Proxima colony. Jake looked at the list of responding ships with amazement. The Prairie Wind was still the closest, arriving later that day. But behind it came a parade of human vessels, each offering supplies, equipment, or expertise. Have they figured out what we're really doing here? Jake asked. Danny grinned. I think some of them have. The captain of the Deep Explorer sent a message this morning that just said, "We're bringing extra blankets and hot soup. Stay strong." That's not exactly standard response to an equipment malfunction. The first sign that their secret was out came when the Prairie Wind dropped out of hyperspace that afternoon. Captain Rick Thompson was a gruff man in his 50s who had been hauling cargo for 20 years. He took one look at the power cables running from the New Horizon down into the planet's surface and started laughing. Equipment malfunction. My foot, he said over the radio. Danny Walsh, you always were a terrible liar. What have you gotten yourselves into this time? Jake decided honesty was the best policy. We found a dying civilization, Rick. About 50,000 alien beings, including a lot of children. They're freezing to death, and we can't save them all ourselves. There was a long pause before Rick responded. Aliens, huh? The kind that shoot at humans? The kind that make art and write poetry, Amy answered. The kind that send distress signals to save their babies. Another pause, then Rick's voice came back, warmer than before. Well, hell. Why didn't you just say so? Prairie Wind is carrying thermal generators for the mining colony on Kepler 7. I guess they can wait a few more weeks for their equipment. By evening, 3 ships were orbiting the planet, and more were arriving every few hours. Captain Rick Thompson had brought massive cargo containers that could serve as temporary shelters. The mining ship Rockbreaker under Captain Pete Johnson, contributed powerful heating equipment designed for asteroid mining. But the real game-changer arrived the next morning in the form of the Deep Explorer, a science vessel commanded by Dr. Kate Sullivan. She was a xenobiologist like Amy, but with 30 years of experience and a ship full of advanced life support systems. "I've been studying your transmissions," Dr. Sullivan told the assembled captains during their first group meeting. "The Cathara are remarkable. Their body chemistry suggests they could adapt to slightly warmer environments over time, given proper support." Jake felt hope stirring in his chest. "Are you saying they could survive on human worlds?" "With the right preparation, absolutely. Several colonies have already contacted me volunteering to take refugees. New Denver, especially, has climate zones that would be perfect for them." The meeting was interrupted by Amy's excited voice over the radio. "Jake, you need to get down here right now. Something amazing is happening." Jake and the other captains rushed down to the Cathara city to find Amy standing in the main chamber, surrounded by dozens of adult Cathara. They were all glowing brightly, their crystalline skin casting rainbow patterns on the walls. "They're singing," Amy explained, tears running down her face. "It's a traditional song of gratitude. Elder Veltar says they haven't had enough energy to sing together in months." The sound was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It wasn't quite music as humans understood it, but something deeper and more complex. The Cathara voices blended together in harmonies that seemed to resonate through the stone walls of the city. Zarath approached Jake, carrying Hope in her arms. The baby was glowing so brightly she looked like a tiny star. Through Amy's translation, Zarath spoke to the assembled humans. "She says the Cathara have a legend about beings of light who would come from the sky to help in their darkest hour," Amy translated. "She says they never believed it was literally true until now." Captain Rick Thompson, the tough cargo hauler, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Well, I'll be damned. We're not just saving lives here, we're fulfilling prophecy." Dr. Kate Sullivan was already making plans. "I can have temporary shelters set up within the week. My ship has medical facilities that can handle any Cathara who need special care during the transition." "How many are we talking about evacuating?" "The children and pregnant mothers first," Jake said immediately. "Then the elderly and sick. The healthy adults can wait until we have more permanent solutions." "No," came a voice from behind them. It was Veltar, the Cathara elder, speaking in halting English that he had learned from Amy. "Families, stay together. Children need parents. Parents need children." Jake nodded, understanding. "All right. We evacuate family groups, but children are still the priority." Over the next few days, the rescue operation grew into something unprecedented. More human ships arrived daily, bringing supplies, equipment, and volunteers. Word was spreading through human space about the aliens who needed help, and the response was overwhelming. Captain Pete Johnson's mining equipment had carved out new, larger chambers in the Cathara city where families could stay warm while waiting for evacuation. Ben Rodriguez's medical bay was treating dozens of Cathara daily, helping them regain their strength. Hope had become a symbol of the entire operation. She was healthy, happy, and growing stronger every day. The human volunteers loved her, and she seemed to enjoy the attention. Her favorite activity was making her skin glow in patterns that matched human laughter. But the most important development came from an unexpected source. Danny Walsh, who had been monitoring communications, reported that his coded distress calls had reached Earth itself. "Captain, I'm getting a transmission from Earth Central Command," Danny said, his voice tight, with nervousness. "They want to talk to you. Now." Jake felt his stomach drop. This was it. The moment when the authorities stepped in and shut down the entire operation. He walked slowly to the communications station, expecting to hear charges being read against him. Instead, he heard the voice of Admiral Sarah Mitchell, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice warm and proud. "I'm calling to let you know that the Earth Assembly voted unanimously last night to support your rescue operation. We're designating it as an official humanitarian mission under emergency protocols Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Admiral, I don't understand. We broke regulations. We interfered with a primitive civilization." "Captain," Admiral Mitchell said with a laugh, "you found a bunch of mothers trying to keep their babies warm and you decided to help. That's not a crime. That's what makes us human." 2 weeks after the first human ship had answered Danny's coded distress call, the frozen planet looked like a busy spaceport. 12 human vessels orbited overhead, ranging from massive cargo haulers to small personal ships whose owners had simply heard about the rescue and come to help. Jake stood on a small hill overlooking the entrance to the Kythera city, watching as the latest group of evacuees prepared to board the transport ship New Hampshire. Children and parents walked together toward the waiting shuttle, their crystalline skin glowing with health and hope. "Hard to believe it's only been 2 weeks," said Captain Rick Thompson, joining Jake on the hill. The tough cargo hauler had become something of a coordinator for the rescue fleet, using his decades of experience to organize the complex logistics of moving thousands of beings. "How many have we evacuated so far?" Jake asked. "Just over 8,000, Rick replied. "Mostly families with young children. Dr. Sullivan's medical team cleared them all for transport to the colony worlds. New Denver has taken the most, but Proxima Station and the farming colonies on Kepler-19 have opened their doors too." Jake watched as Hope, now almost twice the size she had been when they found her, played with a group of human children who had arrived with their parents on volunteer ships. The baby Kythera had become the unofficial mascot of the rescue operation, her cheerful nature winning over even the most hardened space workers. "Any word from the Galactic Council?" Jake asked. Rick snorted. "Oh, they're furious. Sent 3 formal complaints about human interference in primitive cultures." Admiral Mitchell sent back a one-word reply: "Irrelevant." The truth was, the rescue had grown far beyond what any of them had imagined. What started as one ship trying to help a dying mother and her baby had become the largest humanitarian operation in human history. Volunteers were arriving daily, bringing everything from medical supplies to children's toys. Dr. Kate Sullivan approached them, her tablet full of medical reports. "Jake, I need to talk to you about something important. We've made a breakthrough in understanding Kythera physiology." The 3 captains walked back toward the city, passing through the temporary shelters that had been set up for families waiting for transport. The shelters were warm and comfortable, powered by the network of fusion reactors from the rescue ships. "What kind of breakthrough?" Jake asked. Kate pulled up a chart on her tablet. "Ben's mineral supplements aren't just helping the Kythera survive in warmer temperatures. They're actually improving their overall health. The children especially are showing remarkable adaptation rates." She showed them recordings of Kythera children playing and learning. "Look at this. These kids are not just surviving the transition to human standard environments, they're thriving. Their immune systems are stronger, their growth rates have improved, and their cognitive development has accelerated." "What does that mean for the adults?" Jake asked. "That's the really exciting part," Kate continued. "The adult Kythera can adapt too, but it takes longer. We're talking about a gradual process over several months, but the end result is that they become healthier and stronger than they ever were on their dying homeworld." Rick whistled low. "So, we're not just saving them, we're helping them evolve." The conversation was interrupted by Amy Foster's voice over the radio. "Jake, you need to get to the main chamber right away. Elder Veltar wants to show you something." They found Amy in the heart of the city, standing before a massive wall covered in crystalline panels. Elder Veltar, now healthy and glowing with inner light, was touching different panels in sequence, and each one lit up with complex patterns and symbols. "It's their history," Amy explained, her voice filled with awe. "The entire cultural record of the Kythera civilization, stored in these crystal matrices. Art, science, philosophy, literature, everything they've learned in over 2,000 years of civilization." Veltar spoke in his musical language, and Amy translated. "He says this is their gift to humanity, a complete record of their culture, to thank us for saving their people." Jake looked at the glowing panels with amazement. "This is incredible. But why are they giving it to us?" Amy asked the question in Kythera, then listened to Veltar's long response. He says the Kithara believe that when one species saves another, they become family. He wants human children to learn Kithara art and music, and Kithara children to learn human science and exploration. He's talking about cultural exchange, Kate said with excitement. A permanent partnership between our species. The idea was breathtaking. Jake had started this mission just trying to save lives, but it was becoming something much larger. The relationship between humans and Kithara could change both civilizations forever. Their conversation was interrupted by Danny's urgent voice on the radio. Captain Morrison, please report to communications immediately. We have a problem. Jake and the others hurried to the New Horizons bridge, where Danny was staring at his screens with a worried expression. What is it? Jake asked. 3 Galactic Council ships just dropped out of hyperspace, Danny reported. They're demanding that we stop all evacuation operations immediately and surrender for violations of the non-interference doctrine. Jake felt his stomach clench. He had known this moment would come eventually, but he had hoped they would have more time. How long before they reach the planet? 6 hours, Danny said. They're transmitting on all frequencies, ordering the rescue fleet to disperse. Jake looked around at his crew and the other captains who had gathered on the bridge. These people had risked everything to help the Kithara, and now the authorities were coming to shut them down. Options? He asked. Rick Thompson was the first to speak. We could scatter the fleet, make them chase us across 3 star systems while we continue evacuations. That just delays the problem, Kate pointed out. Eventually they'll catch us. Amy, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. What if we don't run? Everyone looked at her. What do you mean? Jake asked. What if we stay and make them explain to the entire galaxy why they want to stop us from saving children? Amy said, her voice growing stronger. The Kithara aren't a primitive civilization anymore. They're partners with humanity now. They can speak for themselves. Jake understood immediately. A public hearing. Make the council justify their actions. In front of everyone. Danny, Jake said, patch me through to all ships in the rescue fleet, and make sure this transmission gets recorded and sent to every human colony in space. A moment later, Danny nodded. You're live, Captain. Jake took a deep breath and began speaking. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the New Horizon, speaking to the rescue fleet and all human colonies. 3 weeks ago, we discovered the Kithara people slowly freezing to death on their homeworld. We found mothers holding their babies, trying to keep them warm with the last few minutes of power in their failing city. He paused, looking at the faces around him. We could have followed regulations. We could have reported the situation and waited for official approval, while 50,000 beings died in the cold. Instead, we chose to help. We chose to be human. Jake's voice grew stronger. The Galactic Council is coming to shut us down. They say we violated the non-interference doctrine. I say we followed a higher law, the law that says you don't leave children to freeze in the dark. He looked directly into the camera. The Kithara are not primitive anymore. They are our partners, our friends, our family, and we don't abandon family. Across the rescue fleet, ship captains began responding. One by one, they confirmed their commitment to continue the mission, regardless of what the council said. Captain Rick Thompson was the first. Prairie Wind standing by. We're not going anywhere. Captain Pete Johnson from the Rockbreaker followed. We came here to save lives, that hasn't changed. Dr. Kate Sullivan's voice came through clearly. The Deep Explorer will continue providing medical support. These people need us. One by one, all 12 ships in the rescue fleet confirmed their position. They would stay and continue the evacuation, even if it meant facing the Council's justice. But the biggest surprise came from an unexpected source. Elder Veltar, who had been learning to use human communication equipment, requested permission to speak. His English was still halting, but his message was clear. Galactic Council, he said, his musical voice carrying across all frequencies. Kithara people, free people, choose human friends, not need council permission to live. Jake smiled. The Kithara had just declared independence and chosen sides in the same breath. The council couldn't claim they were interfering with a primitive civilization anymore. "Danny," Jake said, "send a message to those council ships. Tell them we're not running, we're not hiding, and we're not stopping. If they want to arrest us for saving lives, they can do it in front of the whole galaxy." The Galactic Council Tribunal was unlike anything Jake Morrison had ever seen. Representatives from dozens of species filled the massive chamber on Council Station Alpha, their alien forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes under the bright lights. At the center of it all, 3 human captains sat at a small table, facing charges that could end their careers and land them in prison for decades. But Jake wasn't looking at the judges or the prosecutors. He was watching the gallery, where hundreds of beings had come to witness the hearing. And in the front row, glowing softly with inner light, sat Elder Veltar and a dozen other Kithara, including Zarath, holding her baby Hope. It had been 6 months since the rescue operation began. The Galactic Council had eventually agreed to a public hearing after human colonies across 3 star systems threatened to withdraw from Council membership. The case had become the most watched legal proceeding in galactic history. "Captain Morrison," said Judge Kretak, a tall, blue-skinned being with 4 arms, "you stand accused of violating the sacred doctrine of non-interference. How do you plead?" Jake stood slowly. He had practiced this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, he decided to speak from the heart instead. "Your Honor, I plead guilty to helping mothers keep their children warm. I plead guilty to refusing to watch babies freeze to death in the dark. If that violates your sacred doctrine, then your doctrine needs to be changed." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor, a thin gray being with large black eyes, stepped forward. "The defendant admits his guilt," Prosecutor Zilvan said in a voice like grinding metal. "The law is clear. Primitive civilizations must be allowed to develop naturally, without outside interference. By saving the Kithara, the humans have contaminated their natural evolution." "Objection," came a clear voice from the defense table. Admiral Sarah Mitchell had come to represent the human position personally. The Kithara are not a primitive civilization. They had achieved spaceflight centuries before Earth even discovered radio. They are our technological equals and our cultural superiors in many ways. Judge Kretak gestured for silence. "The court recognizes that the Kithara had advanced technology, but they were isolated on a single dying world facing extinction. The Council's position is that this was a natural evolutionary pressure that should not have been interfered with." "Natural?" Amy Foster stood up from the gallery, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Your Honor, I've spent 6 months studying Kithara culture, their literature, their art, their music. It's some of the most beautiful and sophisticated in the galaxy. How is it natural to let that disappear forever?" "The witness will remain seated," Judge Kretak said sternly. But Elder Veltar was already rising from his seat. His English had improved dramatically over the past months, and his voice carried the musical quality that made all Kithara speech sound like poetry. "Your Honor," Veltar said, "I speak for Kithara people. We ask counsel, why our children must die to preserve your doctrine?" The chamber fell silent. Judge Kretak looked uncomfortable. "The doctrine exists to prevent stronger civilizations from exploiting weaker ones." "Humans not exploit us," Veltar replied. "Humans save us. Humans share technology, share homes, share food. Kithara children learn human science. Human children learn Kithara art. This is partnership." Zarath stood up next, holding Hope in her arms. The baby had grown into a healthy, curious toddler, whose crystalline skin glowed brightly in the chamber's lights. "My child alive because humans choose kindness over law," Zarath said in careful English. "Now Hope will grow up, have children of her own. Kithara species continue because humans care about strangers." Hope looked around the chamber with wide, intelligent eyes, then did something that made everyone gasp. She began to glow in complex patterns while humming a simple melody. She was trying to communicate with the assembled beings in her own unique way. "She's trying to say hello," Amy translated from the gallery. "In Kithara culture, children are greeted by the entire community. She thinks this is a celebration. Judge Kretak looked down at the glowing child and seemed to struggle with something. The court recognizes the emotional impact of this case, but the law is the law. If we make exceptions, we undermine the entire principle of non-interference. Then, change the law, said a new voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to see Captain Rick Thompson walking down the aisle, followed by Captain Pete Johnson, Dr. Kate Sullivan, and dozens of other humans who had participated in the rescue. Your Honor, Rick said, his gruff voice echoing in the chamber. I've been hauling cargo through this galaxy for 20 years. I've seen a lot of different species, a lot of different worlds, and I can tell you one thing. The universe is a cold, dark place, but it doesn't have to be. He gestured toward Hope, who was still glowing cheerfully in her mother's arms. That little girl is alive today because a bunch of humans decided that some things are more important than rules. Maybe it's time the Council learned that lesson, too. Captain Pete Johnson stepped forward. We're not asking you to throw out all the rules. We're asking you to make room for compassion. Make room for helping when help is needed. Dr. Kate Sullivan nodded. The Cathera-Human Partnership has already produced advances in medicine, art, and science that neither species could have achieved alone. This isn't contamination. It's evolution. Judge Kretak looked around the chamber, then consulted with the other judges in whispered conversation. Finally, he stood. This court will recess for deliberation, he announced. Jake and his crew waited in a small room adjacent to the main chamber. The hours dragged by slowly, filled with nervous conversation and worried speculation about their futures. Finally, Danny Walsh looked up from his communication device. Jake, you need to see this. The screen showed news reports from across the galaxy. Human colonies were holding vigils, calling for the charges to be dropped. But more surprisingly, alien civilizations were also speaking out. The artistic Veltorians had declared Hope an honorary member of their species. The warrior Krexhai had sent a formal statement saying that protecting children was the highest honor any species could achieve. It's not just humans anymore, Danny said with amazement. The whole galaxy is watching. When they were called back into the chamber, Jake was surprised to see that the gallery was even more crowded than before. Beings who hadn't been there earlier had somehow found their way inside. Judge Kretak stood before the packed chamber. This court has deliberated on the charges against the human defendants. We have also considered the broader implications of this case for galactic law and civilization. He paused, looking directly at Jake, then at Hope, who was still glowing contentedly in her mother's arms. The charges of violating the non-interference doctrine are dismissed. The chamber erupted in cheers, but Judge Kretak raised his hand for silence. Furthermore, he continued, this court recommends that the Galactic Council adopt a new doctrine, the humanitarian exception. When any species faces extinction through natural disaster, and when another species can provide aid without conquest or exploitation, such aid shall be not only permitted but encouraged. The cheering was deafening. Jake felt tears running down his face as his crew embraced him. Across the chamber he could see Elder Veltar and Zarath celebrating with their fellow Cathera, but the judge wasn't finished. Finally, he said, this court formally recognizes the Cathera-Human Alliance as a model for interspecies cooperation. May other civilizations learn from your example. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of New Denver Colony, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Below him, the first permanent Cathera settlement bustled with activity. Children of both species played together in the gardens, their laughter mixing with the musical sounds of Cathera communication. Zarath approached him, carrying Hope, who was now walking and trying to form words in both English and Cathera. Captain, Jake, Zarath said in fluent English, I have something for you. She handed him a small crystal that pulsed with soft light. This is a memory crystal. It contains the story of our rescue, as told by the Cathera. We want human children to know what their people did for us. Jake accepted the crystal carefully. Thank you, Zarath. But you know we didn't do it for recognition. We did it because it was right. Yes. Zarath smiled. That is what makes humans so special. You help strangers become family. Hope reached out toward Jake with her tiny hands, babbling something that sounded like Uncle Jake in her musical voice. Jake laughed and gently took the toddler's hand. Her skin glowed warmly at his touch, and he realized that this little girl would grow up in a universe where humans and Cathara worked together, learned together, and faced the future together. Amy Foster joined them on the observation deck, carrying a tablet full of cultural exchange reports. Jake, you should see the latest numbers. 3 more colonies have requested Cathara settlements, and the University of New Earth wants to establish a joint xenobiology program with Cathara scientists. Any word from the council? Jake asked. Amy grinned. 2 more species have invoked the humanitarian exception this month. The Talvari helped evacuate an oceanic world that was being destroyed by its sun, and the Zephyri are providing agricultural